Our presentation is about authenticity and its effect on commercialism, and vice versa. Our presentation is broken down into the following subtopics. Firstly, an introduction, and secondly, we'll be moving on to an example of music that is both commercial and inauthentic, and the case study we'll be using is the X Factor. Thirdly, we will give an example of music that is both commercial and authentic, and the case study we'll be using is the hip-hop artist Kendrick Lamar. The fourth topic will be about the role of technology in affecting both commercialism and authenticity. And finally, we'll finish with a conclusion. To begin, here are the key words of the presentation. Authenticity has been defined as of undisputed origin or veracity. In other words, something genuine. Commercialism is being defined as making or intended to make profits. In regards to the music industry, musicologists tend to refer to authenticity when talking about styles such as jazz, Latin, and even hip-hop. Hip-hop is a style where both commercialism and authenticity mix together, and I will mention this later in a case study. In regards to the music industry, musicologists tend to refer to commercialism when talking about styles such as pop, dance, or disco. Now on to what musicologists might think about the subjects of authenticity and commercialism. Alan Moore quotes Gilbert and Pearson on what they said in the year 1999, and that they thought authenticity is guaranteed through one form of instrumentation, and this is the vocals. This is because the vocals have the main role of representing the culture behind those in the band and themselves. I would agree, because instruments can express authenticity, but you have to use traditional instruments to that style, meaning you are limited in the originality of the arrangements. However, every singer's voice is unique, and so this expresses authenticity. Now on to what Alan Moore thinks himself. He thinks that authenticity is displayed through artists speaking truthfully of theirs and other people's life situations and their culture. He thinks that authenticity is ascribed and not inscribed, and he also thinks that authenticity is not about what is written, but who performs it. He then says whether a performance is authentic then depends on who we are as a performer or writer, and however, if authenticity does not inhere in the music that we listen to, then where does it lie? He then assumes that it is a construction based on the act of listening. My argument against this is that if, like Alan Moore says, authenticity is not about what is written, but who writes or performs it, then surely what is written must be authentic in itself. Moore's view can also be linked to the X Factor. We will discuss this later on, but when they perform covers on the show, is it authentic because it's about them personally making the song their own in their performance? Now on to Alan Moore's theory of authenticity. It's broken down into three sections, and the first person authenticity, which is the authenticity of expression, and this is when the composer-performer succeeds in conveying that his or her utterance is one of integrity, and that it attempts to communicate in an unmediated form with the audience. Second person authenticity, which is the authenticity of experience, and this occurs when a performer succeeds in conveying to an audience or listener that the listener's experience of life is being validated, and that the music is telling it like it is for them. Third person authenticity, which is the authenticity of execution. This arises when a performer succeeds in conveying the impression of accurately representing the ideas of another embedded within a tradition of a performance. Now on to Roy Schucker. Roy Schucker thinks of authenticity. He believes that authenticity assumes that the producers of music undertook the creative work themselves, and that there is an element of originality and creativity present along with connotations of seriousness, sincerity, and uniqueness. He also implies the idea that how authentic a piece of music is can be can be determined by how commercial it is. This helps dichotomize, in other words divide, music between both independent record labels, which are involved with less commercial music and more authentic music, and major record labels, which are involved with more commercial music and less authentic. He also says that commerce and artistic integrity are frequently utilized to demarcate rock from pop music, both authentic and commercial respectively. Arvid Mark Ashby, he's another musicologist who says recording is especially open to accusations of mass media commercialism because it is based on technology that stretches back just 100 years ago. I personally would agree with this because the technology gives the option to manipulate and therefore makes music less authentic and more commercial. We will now move on to the next topic, which is an example of music that is both commercial and inauthentic. Over to Cody.
X Factor is an example of a show that consists of non-authenticity. X Factor is not very authentic, as many of the contestants on the show are auto-tuned, meaning they may be mimed, including the band on live performances. The show is about marketing the artists, making them a desirable product. The show plays on the audience's heartstrings about how hard it's been for the artists making it into the industry. The show is manufactured and there to provide a public entertainment and the artists are moulded into what public desire. The show is about marketing the artists, making them a desirable product for the audience. I will now hand you over to Andy.
The case study I will be using to explain that an example of music as both authentic and commercial is the album titled To Pimp a Butterfly by the hip-hop artist Kendrick Lamar. And this album was released in March 2015, so it's a relevant idea of popular music. Firstly, what makes the album a commercial one? Compared to his older works, Kendrick Lamar incorporates styles that aren't associated with commercial music of today, such as popular forms of funk and even pop. Some salient stats that show this can be considered a commercial album are that firstly, within the first day of its release, the album To Pimp a Butterfly was streamed a huge 9.6 million times. Secondly, 318,000 copies were sold in its first week alone, which later reached 1 million by the end of 2015, less than a year after its release date. What makes it an authentic album? On the album, he has worked with musicians that aren't associated with commercial forms of music of today. For example, the jazz fusion bassist called Thundercat was on the album, as well as the jazz saxophonist named Kamasi Washington. Also, the album discusses cultural topics that affect African American communities, and this is a subject very close to Kendrick Lamar's heart. In an interview with MTV News, he stated that making the album was a spiritual process and that he feels he needs to feel connected to the music that he's making. To refer to the definition of commercialism, it is music that is made to make profit. However, whilst To Pimp a Butterfly has gained largely commercial success, most people would argue that he has in no way made the album to make money. This is because he has a deep connection with the political and personal aspects of growing up in an African American community. I think his album would fit into Alan Moore's first person authenticity, which is the authenticity of expression. In other words, something that makes the artist themselves authentic. What do other musicologists think of? What would other musicologists think of this album? In her book, Black Noise, Rap Music and Black Culture in Contemporary America, Trisha Rose states that rap music brings together a tangle of some of the most complex social, cultural and political issues in contemporary American society. This further strengthens the idea that Kendrick Lamar's album is of an authentic kind, because the album also brings together these issues and he has stayed true to the roots of rap music. I think To Pimp a Butterfly is clearly commercial in the sense that it has been distributed to the masses globally. However, it is not commercial in the sense that it has not been made to make profit. Therefore, it is up to debate whether the album is in fact a commercial one. To relate this to the topic title, authenticity and its effect on commercialism, I personally think that Kendrick Lamar's album, To Pimp a Butterfly, is both authentic and commercial. However, how authentic the album is has limited its commercial status, I think, because he has said in an MTV News interview that I mentioned a while ago that he has a deep connection with music and it is not just made to make money. To relate this to what Roy Shuker thinks, which is how authentic an album is, can be determined by how commercial it is. I think its commercial status, like I've said, has been limited, but only on the fact that it has not been made to make money. It is, however, a commercial album in the sense that it has been distributed to the masses, being the general public. Along with this, it is also an authentic album because of the content on the album. I'll pass you over to Marius, who will be talking about the topic in relation to technology.
In the following part, I'm dealing with the question how technology has affected the way in which commercialism has lessened the authenticity of music. The given information are mainly based on the source how technology has changed music by Mark Katz. Around the end of the 20th century, the phonograph effect was a technological phenomenon. This tangibility has allowed extraordinary changes in the way music can be experienced. When sound is recorded and preserved in a physical medium, this music can be separated from the performer and be replayed without the artist's consent. For example, the listener's consumption need not to end when the singing is over. So with this, we're going to talk about the portability and repeatability of recorded sound. But we come back to the question later. In the 1980s, with relaxed government regulations on their importation, cassettes quickly came to count of 95% of all commercial recordings in India. Therefore, the arrival of the cassette really changed the pop scene. Because it is less complex, this cheaper medium allowed smaller labels and even individuals to create or distribute recordings. This diversification brought new perspectives and even new musical genres. With the advancement of CD production technology, many performers have decided to go into the business for themselves. Music technology is described as a medium for distribution. When music becomes a thing, it gains freedom to travel. Furthermore, when music is recorded and replayed, it is removed from its original setting, losing its unique spatial and temporal identity. The mass-reproduced art does lack temporal and physical uniqueness, yet reproductions no longer bound to the circumstances of their creation may encourage new experience and generate new traditions, wherever they happen to be. The next topic Mark Katz is referring to is the invisibility within the music recording. When musicians record their invisibility to listeners, removes an important channel of communication. For performance, express themselves not only through the sound of their voices or instruments, but with their faces and bodies. In concerts, the gestures color the audience's understanding of the music. As Igor Stravinsky rightly explained, the sight of the gestures and movements of the various parts of the body producing the music is fundamentally necessary. So, the power of visual is further demonstrated when audio and visual channels are odd with each other. So, one might ask the question if the loss of what we see reduces the authenticity of music. When we talk about repeatability, there are certain parameters to recreate sound exactly, such as pitch, precise volume, length, intensity, timbre, attack and decay. Live performances are unique, while recordings are repeatable. This statement deserves further explanation. Live music is in fact repeatable, but in the form of works, not performances. This difference between live and recorded music may not seem especially momentous, but in fact it may have the most complex and far-reaching consequences of any of the technology. Repeatability of recorded sound has affected listeners' expectations on listening to music. When the phonograph, for example, was invented, the goal for any recording was to simulate a live performance, to approach reality as closely as possible. Over the decades, expectations have changed. For many, perhaps most, listeners, music is now primarily a technology for mediation experience. Concerts must therefore live up to recordings. Therefore, the impact of recordings' repeatability on performance is significant. Next, we're going to talk about the temporality. With the advent of sound recording, a new rigidity was introduced into the world of music. One imposed not by performance or audiences, but by a machine. Although over the decades, the time limitation has become less severe. For the 71 years between the invention of the phonograph and the introduction of the long-playing disc, recordings could play no more than about 4.5 minutes of music continuously. For listeners living in the pre-LP era, longer pieces had to be broken down over multiple discs. The discontinuity of experience caused by the need to change sides and records could lead to some perceived works in units dictated not by the music itself, but by the length of the discs. The time limitation affected popular music even more deeply. Martin Williams suggested that some early blues singers crafted the narrative structure of the songs specifically to fit the playing time of the 78, which was a recording opportunity. The 3-minute pop song itself may be considered a phonograph effect. In the late 1940s, RCA Victor introduces the 45 RPM record as an alternative. Because of its limited playing time, not suitable for classical music. It became the standard format for pop and remained so for decades. Although popular music was sometimes released on LPs beginning in the 1950s, few musicians took advantage of the possibility to record longer works. And the reason was strictly commercial. Much of the revenue of pop music came from the scale of singles released in the 45s, which filled the jukeboxes and received the most radio play. A longer song would have practically no chance to sell well. The ways in which the technology is accommodated may both limit and expand the possibilities of musical performance. Another topic Marquez is referring to of music is the manipulability of music. Listen to most early 20th century recordings and you will hear a performance in the traditional sense. Hearing a single and a complete take in which the beginning, middle and the end of the piece were recorded in that order on the same day, also in the same place and by the same performer or group. This was hardly out of a desire for authenticity, it was a product of necessity. However, since the introduction of the magnetic tape and the digital recording, it has been possible to offer the illusion of a traditional performance as well to create performances that could have never existed. With the ability to manipulate sound through such technology, musicians have been able to transcend time, space and human limitations, and in the process have created wholly new sounds, works, genres and performance traditions. Now I have to move on.
To conclude the presentation, the X Factor has an aim of generating money and doesn't focus on the music as much, so it's inauthentic. Artists such as Kendrick Lamar have a sole intention of creating meaningful and real music, primarily authentic, and is very popular with music listeners but are not generated to make profit. Developments in technology in music can lead to loss of expression and authenticity. Music that is recorded is removed from its original setting, therefore losing its unique spatial setting. Saying this, it can also be a new way to express emotions. For the listeners, records are not live performances, and so they cannot perceive the real emotion behind the music.